Welcome. So Nigel is going to be talking about having agility in your business and how to pivot and how those are keys to surviving and thriving. He's got a really cool story about a pivot that he experienced and how it 3x'd his business. So I'm excited for him to share about that. He's also a best-selling author. So welcome, Nigel.
Hey, how you doing, Britt? How you doing, everybody? Nice to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah. And thank you, Connie. You're so funny. I just saw your comment about Justin's great hair. All right, so Nigel, let's start by I want to hear about this story. So you've told me that your company had a really big pivot during COVID-19 and that it led to you tripling your business. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those freaky stories, but yeah, our business is local, national, and international. We look at things for in the industry area, I have a pharma background. And so we're looking at documents, we're looking at facilities, we do a lot of assessments for companies. And I was coming back from, I was coming back from China and India towards the end of 19. And we saw what was going on. No idea that it was going to be, like shut down the world for a year.
Yeah.
But we could see that something was going to be causing us an interruption in travel. We could go through this kind of periodically. So when I came back, I sat down and I said, we've got to do something. We have about 15 different services that we supply. And I said, we can't do half of these or majority of them. So let's pick one or two things. What can we do if we went online? And what we came up with was, well, we can look at documents. We can put those in a secure room. We can password protect, and so we can look at confidential documents. We can do interviews over like we're doing now. We can talk to people face to face. We can do that. And if we use live streaming with our cell phones, would you believe, we can walk around people's places and they can show us stuff and we can interrogate them and ask questions. So we had a plan. So we put a protocol together. And beginning of towards the end of January, I'm sending this thing out to all our client base and what have you, saying, hey, we've got business with you. And they were coming back and saying, yeah, we're not gonna be able to do that, Nigel. We're gonna be able to do this. We can't do this. Our company's freezing things. And of course, the president closed the country down the first week of March of 20. So I then sent out a bunch of more emails and said, yeah, but look, we can do this. And we did it for one company and then we did it for another company. And then another company came along. And before we knew it, everything was kind of rocking and rolling. And we were an online baby. It just took off. And it kind of rescued us in 20. And then in 21, this thing just grew like a horrible sort of thing. It just grew and grew. In 22, what happened by 22 was we were still doing stuff online, but now people were asking us to go back out and we were doing, so the online pivot created a lot of extra new business that we didn't have. And yes, it tripled our business. So by shrinking our focus and then going online, we rescued the business, grew the business double, and then triple the business, because by the time we were able to go back out live, as it were, we had this combination now of live and online assessments that we could do. And interestingly, the end of 22, I was speaking at a big event in India. I think I told you about this, where we were talking to it was like a religious thing. We were talking about leadership to over 500,000 people. And that week, whilst I was away, I was tasked to talk to the pharmaceutical businesses here in the United States, in Washington, D.C. And I actually pivoted whilst I was on a pivot to actually give this presentation here in D.C. In the United States. Wow. When I was in India. So this gave us enormous flexibility. And I introduced a concept that rather than doing these on-site inspections or what have you every year, we could back them off to maybe every 3 years, but we would do this online virtual look-see assessment on an annual basis. And so people like that because the cost of travel, both in terms of time and money for people, was very, very expensive. For us, if you've traveled to Asia or even just to Europe and back in a week, it beats you up pretty bad. You start doing that sort of 9 and 10 times a year, and it really does tire you out. Whereas now we could hop online, even if it's working at 2 o'clock in the morning till 2 o'clock in the afternoon here in the United States, we could get to the same point, and obviously not lose the time, Brit. So it really worked out very favorably, and it saved our bacon, I can tell you, because I was really worried, like everybody was, you know.
Yeah, yeah, especially local business owners because yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of local businesses aren't online yet, or I know a
no,
lot shifted to online during COVID, like you did. So I think that's just such a also powerful testament to how important it is that we are online and that we are expanding past
right.
like one of our speakers earlier, Donald talked about how we don't just have a 50-mile radius or 250-mile radius as
No,
local business owners. We actually have a worldwide radius with the
we
internet.
do.
So
We do. I mean, we're
that's a
a local
powerful
business.
testament to it.
You're absolutely right. We're local, but we can be
Mhm.
international by virtue of being online now. And so you've
Yeah.
got to think all of the audience or listeners here should be thinking that way, that maybe we can't, depending on what business they're in, you can sell internationally as a local business.
Yeah, I would say every business because everybody has the opportunity to consult people, to teach
No,
people, to even teach, even if you're a plumber, sure, maybe you can't fix the toilet virtually, but you can consult somebody, you can teach other plumbers, you can teach people
teach them how to
how to
do it. Yeah,
DIY stuff at home. Yeah, there's always going to be ways that you can take your business online if you get
right.
creative enough. So I love that. Well, when it comes to pivoting, what are some key signs that you've seen in your experience that tell businesses that it probably is time for a pivot, whether it's like a strategy, offerings, whatever? What are those like key things that you would see that say, okay, it's time to shift?
I think it really comes down to it's a numbers game. So you got to know your business. You got to know your numbers, the things that you're doing. You know, if we're not developing new client leads, maybe our messaging's wrong. If we're not developing new client needs, maybe that's a product that they actually don't want. We've got to listen, and we've got to have mechanisms out there that's feeding us the right sort of data so that we can make decisions. One of the things I always tell everybody is, look, we're in the relationship business, so we've got to be interactive. It's an interactive game that we're playing here. We can't sell or we can't market to our clients unless we actually know what they want. And we've got to be presenting it in the right format that they're going to consume it, whether it's ads, like in some of our work, we use, Facebook ads or LinkedIn ads, whether it's mailers, say we use MailChimp. So maybe we put things out that way, but you've got to know what the client wants in terms of the service or the product that you're actually supplying. And if you don't know that, so there's got to be some background work that you've got to do, and you've got to have, I always say, a baseline, whether it's a few weeks worth of data or 3 months worth of data, so that you have something to work with, so that when you do pivot, you can see, by collecting data again, you can see what the effect of the change that you've made is having on new business coming in. One of the things I always tell
It's
everybody
so
is,
important.
look, get used to change, get
I
comfortable
love
with being
that.
uncomfortable, get used to being uncomfortable, because as a people, we don't like change. We like the comfort zone. It's
hmm
secure, it's warm and fuzzy. When you ask something to change, there's resistance. We've got to get used to overcoming resistance. I always tell people, as I say, get used to being uncomfortable, because if you can do that, you're going to be 80% ahead of most of the people, maybe more than that. There's maybe
hmm
only 20% of the people out there in your space that are actually even thinking about being uncomfortable, because being uncomfortable is the change process. And what you've got to get used to is being that change agent within your own organization. So if you can do that, you're going to be ahead of the game.
Oh, I love that. I love that message of resilience. I feel like that is so important for business owners to, like you said, get used to change, get comfortable with
Mhm.
being uncomfortable. You're absolutely right. That's 80% of business. I mean, that is what's going to set you apart from competitors, keep your doors open over time. So I think that's just a really incredible message. Thank you for sharing that.
Uh-huh.
So when it comes to pivoting, I know it can feel like a really daunting process. Being in business is already hard enough. And so then to think about, oh my gosh, changing something, especially when it's a big pivot. Um, can you kind of maybe break down those initial steps when a business owner does decide, okay, it's time for me to pivot, it's time for me to change things up? What are some of those like initial steps that we can take to maybe not feel so overwhelmed by the process?
Right. I think it's really important to, obviously you've got to have a plan. You've got to involve people. So it's always best to show the data that you're looking at so that everybody understands strategically what it is you're planning to do. You've got a data set that's telling you something that maybe there's been a fall off in actually the requirement for your product or your service. So you're probably going to come up with a process that says, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to change the way we're messaging. We're going to change even maybe the formats that you're going to use on social media, or we're going to change the type of things that we're sending out, maybe on a broadcast on MailChimp, for example. Then, what we've done is ask for everybody's input, ask for the thoughts about this. I think it's really important that you get useful feedback from everybody in the group. And it's really important from a morale perspective to make sure that they can get comfortable with that. I think if you, I'll go back to what I said a few minutes ago. People are uncomfortable. You're asking them to change something that, maybe they thought they were really good at, and now, we're having to acknowledge, hey, maybe we're not that good anymore. Something has changed in the marketplace, and our message isn't resonating to the same extent. So it's very important that you bring them along with your idea, your vision, if you will. And I would always ask, what do you think about the plan? Listen, get their input. You maybe want to morph it, massage it in some way, but certainly get them on board. And the reason why that's important is, as I said, you're going to put them through an emotional sort of warp, if you will. And what you want to make sure is that they're not scared beyond a certain point. You're trying to overcome this fear factor that the new approach is going to be successful. From your point of view as the leader, if you will, it's very important again to be resolute. We've got to take the emotion out of this. If you think about investing, if you're going to change or sell your stocks every 2 minutes when you see something going up and down, the chances are you're going to blow it. Whereas if you have a resolute approach and you keep your emotion out of things, the chances are that you will execute properly a successful strategy. It's very important that they get confident that the approach that we as a group are going to adopt is going to be a winning strategy. So that's the way I would approach things, and that's the way we have approached pivots. It's come up with a plan based on data. It's always got to be based on data. You've got to record the data, you've got to measure, and then kind of report back how well are we doing. And if you can do that, then I'm sure that you're going to be successful in maintaining and actually growing your business.
That's amazing. I love that focus too on on the data, on the measuring what's actually happening and reporting it. I think sometimes it can be intimidating for us business owners to really look at the data and look at our numbers. Sometimes there's just weird emotion. So I actually really love that you brought that up about emotions too, taking the emotions out of it and just looking at things neutrally. Because I know emotions can take us out too as business owners. So being willing to look at the data and to be neutral about it, and
Right.
then like you said, enrolling everybody around us that we're connected with, that gets to help us with this change or with a pivot that we're working on. I think those are really good tips for actually making it through a big change like that.
I think something else that's probably important as you go through this exercise, Britt, is understand what your risk threshold is. What do I mean by that? You need to understand, how comfortable you are in making changes. So, how much are you prepared to spend on a budget? If we talk about budgets, how much are you prepared to grow a strategy or pivot on that strategy? It's very, very important that people get comfortable with the idea of the pivot and understand that this is not a one-time deal. What I always tell people is, look, incorporate this into your operational lifestyle, as I call it. So it's like going to the gym. We're not going to get fit going to the gym once. We're going to build this in. We're going to go several times a week. So we're going to get used to the idea that we're going to pivot maybe several times over the course of a year, because we're going to be looking at data, and it's going to be working. And then something's going to change. And the pivot might be as simple as, if we're doing Facebook ads or ads like that, for example, that we're going to change the images that we're using that are stopping people as they scroll, the colors that we're using. You can test any one of those at any moment in time to see whether or not it's relevant, whether or not the message is still landing. On our Facebook ads, we look at the data every week and build a flow chart and see what's converting, how many hits we're getting, what the take-up is using the analytics. And based on that, we would say, okay, we need to change the wording maybe slightly in the ads. We notice something is resonating. We might run it for 2 or 3 weeks and see what the output is. Well, that didn't work. Okay, let's change the image and let's try again. So you need to get that. And you can only do that if you understand what your risk tolerance is, because it does, it does take some overcoming of the fear and the building of the confidence to enable you to be that way. Otherwise, you won't be effective. And, what we're trying to do is to encourage people with the right approaches and the right strategies so that they can be effective and therefore successful.
Oh, that's so good. I love Connie also dropped in the chat. If you don't know your numbers, you could end up with no numbers. I think that's so good.
Yeah.
Because that goes, like you said about the risk tolerance, you really need to know your numbers to be able to make those pivots wisely and to not be wasting your time and your energy and your money. So we've got about 1 minute left, Nigel. I'd love for you to talk about your free gift. You wanted to offer a free
Yeah.
1 hour business consultation, right?
Yeah. I mean, I know maybe to some of the audience that some of this may be new, and they may be saying, well, how do we do that? How do we measure? How do we assess our risk? So what I would offered is, jump on and book a consult. I'll give you 1 hour, a free consult where we can actually hit the sort of things that I've mentioned on here today. You can pick what it is, aspects that you want to look at, whether it's how do I do a risk assessment, or what's my risk tolerance, or what type of, for my business, what type of approaches might be good approaches. And I'm more than happy to share that and offer my opinions. And then we'll take it from there. If that's something longer term that comes out of this, that, we can form a relationship that sustains them and is good for everybody, then, we can take that further. But certainly, that's what I would offer at this point, and I hope that is attractive to the audience, the listeners today.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Nigel. So for anybody that wants to go ahead and book that free consultation with him to go over your numbers, go over your business, the link is in the chat right now. We'll also make sure to email that out later, so you can go ahead and book that with him now. And we're going to pop you off. Thank you so much, Nigel, for everything you shared today. It was so valuable.